Just want to say welcome to our Ginseng Marketplace meeting. Glad that everyone could be here. Glad the sun was shining today. And we welcome you. So we will start it with Miss Susan Leopold with the United States Plant Savers. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everybody. I think we're gonna kick off this talk with a short video that was made in regards to the symposium that was held in West Virginia. United Plant Savers is a nonprofit organization that's deeply committed to the conservation of native medicinal plants. And this is really where the vision came from to do the Future of Ginseng and Forest Botanical Symposium. We wanted to bring together a diversity of stakeholders that were engaged in the conservation of these medicinal plants so that we could together come up with a national conservation plan for ginseng, and ginseng really leading the way for how we can protect these other forest botanicals. The theme of this symposium is how conservation, cultivation, and commerce are deeply interconnected. We cannot have commerce without conservation.
All right, so the $64,000 question, let's start right in. Is ginseng declining?
A lot of people that are concerned about the state of ginseng and other forest botanicals that grow with it. And I've been to a lot of conferences. This one is fairly unique in bringing together academicians alongside government workers, alongside the people that are actually doing the harvesting and the people that are making the medicine and the consumers that are buying the medicine.
It was the first time all the parties kind of coalesced around some of these issues and got on the same page with things.
This is a 300-year anniversary for the first exportation of wild ginseng from Boston Harbor to Guangzhou. But this is our national treasure because there's no other nation in the world have our resources like we have. We had to protect them.
I always thought it was pretty cool that ginseng is the only plant we hunt. It's not like I'm going to go out and look for some spongilia. It's like I'm going to go hunt some ginseng.
And I've been hunting ginseng since 1973. If I know somebody who's digging it out of season, I'm gonna turn them in because they hurt my future as well as everybody that's involved in the whole scope.
Whatever you dig, you leave a third. I said, it'll propagate itself. If you take everything, you're done.
The legal harvest of American ginseng roots is far too young. Plants are not even producing viable offspring and replacing themselves until, at least 8 to 12 years.
The people making regulation have no idea what I'm doing as a poacher. The poachers have no idea the regulations that are being made. I really hope that at the end of all of this, we can spark a conversation.
A long-term project to move away from wild harvesting, but if we can incentivize people with reasonable prices and with a solid, stable market, we feel that there's a lot of potential to bring the woodland botanicals into cultivation and to have them stewarded on people's private lands.
And we see some of these rural areas really need to know that there's things that maybe they could grow on their family's land and not just go ginseng hunting, or maybe they can use the leaf, or they can plant starts for others, So I think that awareness is coming around.
To promote the cultivation of at-risk plants, to me, it's just a win-win.
It's going to take the whole, from collector, intermediary dealers, brokerage houses, on up to the end users, all to collaborate to help the funding of getting botanicals into cultivation and long-term viability.
I think there's a trust issue between us as the conservation community and the industry. That's a really important piece of what we need to build.
I sort of see it piggybacking on the food movement. I remember 5 years ago I walked in the grocery store and this organic segment was 10 feet. Now you go and there's a whole corner of organic food. I see that happening in the supplement industry. People are supporting it. They want organic, they want clean, they want sustainable.
Only the organic ginseng is really the old ginseng that helps the human body.
So if I want a section to be organic, I'll put it in transition after a certain period of time.
It's very hard to grow ginseng organic.
Very hard. It's the same way when you receive theft. Not to say that I have root rot elsewhere, but, anytime you're disturbing the soil, this is what's going to happen.
One of the things that I would love to see happen is greater education on what American ginseng can actually be used for by herbalists here in this country. It is our herb, it is our tradition, but the uses of it have been lost.
The incredible thing that happened at this conference was, I think, those connections of the realities of the field and the realities of data gathering and bringing all of this incredible genius together, and also seeing that we're all kind of doing the same work.
There's no other organization that is driven in its mission to protect these medicinal plant populations so that they'll be available for future generations, not just for the health of the ecosystem and the health of our bodies, but also for the stewardship and continuation of having these plants be a part of our lives. Help us build the mission of medicinal plant conservation. United Plant Savers is a nonprofit organization that's deeply committed to the conservation of native medicinal plants. And this is really where the vision came from to do the Future of Ginseng and Forest Botanical Symposium. We wanted to bring together a diversity of stakeholders that were engaged in the conservation of these medicinal plants so that we could together come up with a national conservation plan for ginseng, and ginseng really leading the way for how we can protect these other forest botanicals.
The theme of this symposium is how conservation, cultivation, and commerce are deeply interconnected. We cannot have commerce without conservation.
All right, so the $64,000 question, let's start right in. Is ginseng declining?
A lot of people that are concerned about the state of ginseng and other forest botanicals that grow with it. And I've been to a lot of conferences. This one is fairly unique in bringing together academicians alongside government workers, alongside the people that are actually doing the harvesting and the people that are making the medicine and the consumers that are buying the medicine.
It was the first time all the parties kind of coalesced around some of these issues and got on the same page with things.
This is a 300-year anniversary for the first exportation of wild ginseng from Boston Harbor to Guangzhou. But this is our national treasure because there's no other nation in the world have our resources like we have. We had to protect them.
I always thought it was pretty cool that ginseng is the only plant we hunt. It's not like I'm going to go out and look for some spigelia. It's like I'm going to go hunt some ginseng.
And I've been hunting ginseng since 1973. If I know somebody who's digging it out of season, I'm gonna turn them in because they hurt my future as well as everybody that's involved in the whole scope.
Whatever you dig, you leave a third. I said, it'll propagate itself. If you take everything, you're done.
The legal harvest of American ginseng roots is far too young. Plants are not even producing viable offspring and replacing themselves until, at least 8 to 12 years.
The people making regulation have no idea what I'm doing as a poacher. The poachers have no idea the regulations that are being made. I really hope that at the end of all of this, we can spark a conversation.
A long-term project to move away from wild harvesting, but if we can incentivize people with reasonable prices and with a solid, stable market, we feel that there's a lot of potential to bring the woodland botanicals into cultivation and to have them stewarded on people's private lands.
And we see some of these rural areas really need to know that there's things that maybe they could grow on their family's land and not just go ginseng hunting, or maybe they can use the leaf, or they can plant starts for others, So I think that awareness is coming around.
To promote the cultivation of at-risk plants, to me, it's just a win-win.
It's going to take the whole, from collector, intermediary dealers, brokerage houses, on up to the end users, all to collaborate to help the funding of getting botanicals into cultivation and long-term viability.
I think there's a trust issue between us as the conservation community and the industry. That's a really important piece of what we need to build.
I sort of see it piggybacking on the food movement. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, I walked in the grocery store and this organic segment was, 10 feet. Now you go and there's a whole corner of organic food. I see that happening in the supplement industry. People are supporting it. They want organic, they want clean, they want sustainable.
Only the organic ginseng is really the old ginseng that helps the human body.
So if I want a section to be organic, I'll put it in transition after a certain period of time.
It's very hard to grow ginseng organic.
Very hard. It's the same way when you receive theft. Not to say that I have root rot elsewhere, but, anytime you're disturbing the soil, this is what's going to happen.
One of the things that I would love to see happen is greater education on what American ginseng can actually be used for by herbalists here in this country. It is our herb, it is our tradition, but the uses of it have been lost.
The incredible thing that happened at this conference was, I think, those connections of the realities of the field and the realities of data gathering and bringing all of this incredible genius together, and also seeing that we're all kind of doing the same work.
There's no other organization that is driven in its mission to protect these medicinal plant populations so that they'll be available for future generations, not just for the health of the ecosystem and the health of our bodies, but also for the stewardship and continuation of having these plants be a part of our lives. Help us build the mission of medicinal plant conservation.
Some of you in this room were at the symposium, and there's a lot of you that that weren't. So I'd like to give just like a brief history of how the symposium came about. It really started almost well over 2 years ago. U.S. Fish and Wildlife really wanted to collaborate with United Plant Savers to put together this symposium because they felt like the time was needed. There's been a lot of research that's come out, especially the work of Jim McGraw, and he's really who kicked off this symposium. For those of you that don't know Jim McGraw, he got a very significant grant over a decade ago to do a long-term study on wild ginseng populations, and he's also nearing retirement. So this extensive amount of research, not just his own research, but several graduate students who've also done incredible research underneath him. So it was an opportunity to present that information. Also, the USGS has been engaged in very long-term study looking at the genetics of wild populations. And then amongst all of that, just this kind of shifting climate that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services is noticing when it comes to the regulation of CITES. How do we differentiate between wild simulated and wild, and how do we use that to enforce the laws, but also be aware of how perhaps CITES is maybe limiting and discouraging those to grow ginseng. And so they really wanted to bring everybody together to address these issues. So that's where the kind of first discussions came into play, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services had secured money in their budget to pay to bring all the ginseng coordinators from all the states together. And this had not happened, I think, in almost a decade. Just the idea of bringing all these coordinators together to kind of address these issues. So they actually arrived the day before the symposium started and had their own private meetings about issues that they were confronting, especially with law enforcement and regulation.
And I don't know what else they discussed because it was private and nobody else was allowed to go except the coordinators and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And then actually in that video, Jim McGraw took all of the coordinators out to a research site that he was monitoring. And so Jim McGraw's presentation that kicked off the symposium was recorded, and we do hope very soon to put that video online. But basically this gets at a very important point that he wanted to bring up, was that when the regulations were reduced to it being only a 5-year rule for the harvest of wild ginseng, he really feels like that among, the imbalance of the deer population and other threats, that really that needs to be looked at. And there seems to be a growing consensus across the whole, parameter of people who are stakeholders and engaged in this, that, upping the harvest age to 10 or even 13 years, or is the harvest age even what we should be looking at when trying to enforce or regulate the harvest of wild ginseng. So that is a major issue that I think if we all collaborate on, that we could see change that might have a huge impact, so that the ginseng really has that needed capacity to reproduce in the wild, which in his research really states that you're not seeing that reproduction in the wild until 7-10 years. So that's kind of how the symposium came together. So the discussions about the symposium really started even before the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition grant was awarded. And I don't know if somebody's going to present a little bit on that. I'm sure everybody here is pretty familiar. The Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition came about from a 3-year USDA grant that was awarded to a group of collaborators that make up the ABFF coalition. And so we're in the second year. There's still going to be some, the goal of the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition is to really provide resource and knowledge to those that want to gain these hands-on skills to grow these forest botanicals. So there's been, the first 2 years have been an incredible list of workshops, videos, educational material that's all available on the website, and then you can sign up and become a member of the coalition. That's very important if you haven't, because this is how we're going to continue to gain support, by showing how well the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition has developed and how strong it's become in just a short amount of time. I think there's already over 1,000 registered who's done the workshops and gone online and have registered. They put out a great newsletter. It's definitely something to tap into and just show your support. So we can hopefully, we'll be going into year 3. We hope to see it continue, and that we continue to get support from the USDA in this regard. So certainly, as far as United Plant Savers, this was also coordinated with the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition. And I just have this, breakdown. The symposium was attended by around 200 people. 28% of those that attended were forest farmers or landowners. 23% represented the industry purchasing these plants. 21% were members of United Plant Savers. 15% government agencies, and 13% were students. So it's an interesting breakdown of those that attended the event. Going into the symposium, one thing that was really important for me was to make sure that we gathered all the current research. So everybody that presented submitted a paper. This was compiled in what I'm holding in my hand, which is the symposium proceedings. And we have these online on the UPS homepage. So you can download the proceedings yourself. And then there's also the video. We hope to continue to keep adding information like Jim McGraw's talk. And that video that you guys saw was just kind of a snippet of all the interviews that were done by those that attended. So we also hope to maybe expand on sharing those videos. But as you can see from the video, there's so many different aspects to topics that were discussed at the symposium. And in a minute, I'd love to open it up to questions that anybody might have that I could address. When we were doing the symposium out in the foyer, we set up bulletin boards with the themes of conservation, cultivation, and commerce, which was the 3 topics that I really wanted to have discussed at the symposium. And throughout the symposium, we encouraged people to write their thoughts on these issues. So in the beginning of the symposium proceedings is a 4-page document that Chip Carroll, who works for United Plant Savers, put together. And I really encourage you to read it and write to us. We welcome thoughts and feedback. But this document I really am excited about because it's just a collective thoughts of those that attended the symposium. But I think it provides a really solid framework for things that we can address, whether we're growers or harvesters or making herbal products that are really important at this critical junction. I also want to acknowledge how much support we had to put the symposium on. It's pretty much the biggest event that United Plant Savers has ever done. It took a tremendous amount of resources to cover the costs and to also put it together, to have all the speakers, and then to be able to produce the symposium proceedings, to be able to document it. And a lot of that support came from companies in the herbal industry that really care about these issues. And I know Mountain Rose supported this day as well. So I just really want to honor they're the leaders as far as an herb company that has been supporting this initiative to encourage the transition into woodland cultivation of ginseng and some of these other herbs, and to also kind of be a part of what I feel like is an important element is addressing how do we grow a really vibrant domestic market for these plants. And so their initiative to be the first company to sell forest-grown ginseng and to market it and tell that story, it says a lot about them as a company and their commitment to these plants. So I definitely want to acknowledge them. I have been, well, first of all, I just want to know if anybody has any specific questions that maybe you have. Yeah.
Are there links to all the research on the website?
Yes. Well, I mean, to the proceedings. Is that what you're?
Well, I'm interested in I'm interested in the most research. So how do I access that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
The presenters are.
Yeah.
Accessing the information.
Yeah, Jim McGraw's. I mean, without a doubt, I think it's. Does anybody know the website off the top of their head? I think
He's got a web page that you can access almost everything.
Yeah, I think it's Ginseng Conservation. Anyways, if you just Google Jim McGraw and ginseng,
you can just go to
yeah, or maybe I believe it's Wild Ginseng Conservation. But it's a phenomenal website, and certainly we want to ensure. I know United Plant Savers wants to ensure that when he retires, that all that information continues from his website. Yeah.
I just pulled it up. It's Wild Ginseng Conservation.
Yeah, I was close. I had that.
Susan, do you know, has he gotten reassurance from his university that will happen? Is that website through his university or his own?
No, it's through his university, and I I don't think that's been determined.
They can be really bad about
I
that.
know. So might have to do a covert thing and download it all.
Something like
I mean,
that.
it's really nutty times. And just like a side note, everything had been put in place for Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, Nature Serve, all of these people to attend. And when, I won't say his name, got elected, everything got put on hold. I mean, there was no leadership at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. I literally did not know that they were going to show up for the symposium until weeks before the symposium happened. It was a really kind of, gut-wrenching and, I mean, they had no control. They had no, they all wanted to be there, but there was just no leadership. And, it's like, you're going to spend all this money, even though it had been approved. They were just under this, like, we don't know. And probably the most frustrating, I'm giving you the backstory of the symposium. And Gary Kaufman, you can speak to this. I mean, I've had many conversations with Gary and others at the Forest Service, just deeply troubled because I had gone through a year and a half of applying and making sure that the Forest Service could attend, and they were not allowed to attend. And it was just mind-numbing going through that process, and just, maybe you can't speak to it. I won't put you on the spot like that, Gary.
No, I was trumped.
But I think the unique aspect to United Plant Savers and what our mission is conservation of these plants. And the Forest Service essentially is the holder in a large regard of many of these populations on their lands. And having them be an integral part of the conservation plan that we need going forward is really important. And that was a big premises of the symposium that I think was incredibly unique, and I don't think anything's happened like it, was to really have the industry there, those scientists that are monitoring these populations and setting conservation agendas, and then having the industry there, and then having the growers and the diggers and the dealers and the herbalists. I mean, really that whole spectrum to kind of see how we could collaborate on these issues. And really the symposium is just like the first step. Chip will be kind of taking the lead. He's been the sanctuary manager for United Plant Savers. He's also the person who has his own farm where he grows these plants and is just incredibly knowledgeable. Will really be leading us forward as we keep the momentum of the symposium going, and we figure out how to collaborate and not just continue to talk about these issues, but actually make some real changes that have lasting impact. The big one, and I think I mentioned changing the harvest age of wild ginseng, and if anybody has thoughts on it, we're trying to create a platform for which we can all discuss this and how it affects us, and how would we implement it. But it seems like there is a lot of common ground where people are agreeing on this issue. Yeah.
I've got a question that I get from harvesters all the time. Is how do you look at a plant and tell how old it is?
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I'll have diggers tell me that they've been monitoring populations, and they'll see when we go through periods of drought or other stress in this area, that those plants will look different the following years as that stress goes on.
Right.
So what is a way to tell without already damaging the plant and trying to look at scars and
You're talking about the above ground part.
Yeah, when you're out there hunting saying, how do you tell if a plant is 13 years old?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
You just have to dig away some of the soil.
it's just, I think if you're the few diggers that I've been out with are so meticulous. at how they dig away at that root. As
But is
to
that
not
the
damage
common-
it.
That's my concern, is how much damage are they doing?
And not only that, but I have been, working very closely with, Lori and other diggers. And I mean, another huge issue is how much waste. Those smaller plants, how much of them get just wasted in the process when they bring in, diggers are bringing in their big stash. How much of that just gets thrown out right off the get? And not only because they didn't know its age, but also because they broke it, they didn't dry it right, whatever. And there's a lot of just, waste.
And then our buyers don't dare take possession of it. So we've talked about having a can outside the dealer's office where they
so
dump
how
it,
do
and
we,
then
right, and everybody's doing these things in some cases to make sure they're meeting, the legal, I don't want to, so there's,
it's very complicated.
It's very complicated. It's very complicated, and but these are important discussions of how we can work with you as Fish and Wildlife to address these issues, to mitigate, that loss. But
so my point is, I want us to have new rules that are going to be easy for people to understand, and that we just don't go for our best diggers, that we've got this whole core of diggers who are out there to make money. They are more and more aware every year.
I think
they're advancing, but still, they're out there, they want to dig. How do we make it easy for them? I don't know. This
is the other discussion that came up, and so the American Herbal Products Association, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, they have within their organization a non-timber forest working group, and that group is made up of most of the main top ginseng dealers that are out there, Paul Sue and the likes of David Cook and Ed Fletcher and a lot of key people. And so one thing that came out of this discussion was how can we do a digger's license, and how can we update and provide better education. And so it kind of gets at that, but that was a big discussion. And so APA has now hired interns that are going to work with CHIP, and they're trying to collaborate with all the states to figure out ways to implement, even if it was like a fishing license or a hunting license, but a license. And I believe, Robert, is somebody going to speak to that here with
Robert? Is somebody going to speak to it?
Yeah.
Yes, I think right after your talk.
Yeah. So that's a nice lead-in, Janine, because I think a lot of these issues that you're bringing up are maybe somehow to answer that. And there was, like I said, a tremendous amount of research and ideas that were presented. Not only we had some really incredible panel discussions, and so those panel discussions are actually very well summarized. So just reading the first 5 pages of the proceedings are really insightful. And it gets really difficult, as you said, there's a lot of complications, and then there's all the states and all the different ways that they're going about doing their job. Some of the discussion was, is age the right mechanism? Should it be size? And that's up for grabs. I just want the symposium to be a platform for where we can really engage in these discussions, and that's,
I was just curious if there was any discussion of correlation between size and age. I know Jonathan Horton has done a little bit, but has anybody else done anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know of anything published, but Jim McGraw definitely talked about it and discussed it. And but I think, it's like this balance. How do we, implement something that is really easy to teach, easy to enforce? And actually, just after I attended the symposium, I flew to Switzerland to attend the CITES meeting and attended a working group. You know, it's interesting because these issues that we're dealing with are issues that, you know, kind of apply to all kinds of plants that are being wild harvested that are also CITES listed. And artificial propagation is a really tricky term that now there's like they're reevaluating at this time at the CITES level how to define that, how to enforce it, you know, and not just according to how ginseng is reported, but how is this being, you know, worked with other plants that are CITES regulated and heavy in trade. And so it's interesting to be a part of those discussions. I think it's very difficult in any of these situations. How do we, you know, whether it be a verification program or whether it be these rules and regulations trying to put plants in these boxes that they don't really fit into, it's difficult. And then it's difficult to enforce it. So I think the big, you know, I don't want to get into the weeds of legalities and regulations at this meeting, but I do think it's really important to stress that I think we, as within this community, have to take more ownership of the conservation of these plants. And for me, I know going back to the issue with the Forest Service, and you know, it's like I totally want to acknowledge Gary Kaufman and others who have done incredible work monitoring these species. But how can we as a group ensure that we advocate to the right channels to make sure that the Forest Service knows we care and want them to do that work? And I think it was, you know, just disheartening to, you know, not get the Forest Service more engaged with the symposium and what?
Susan, so on the Forest Service and forest side of things, you know, bills come down the line that threaten the entire forest ecosystem.
Right, right.
So have you heard of, I mean, I know like SELC and others bring, you know, court orders and things like that, but have you heard of other groups talking about how can we best advocate on behalf of the plants that are part of the forest? So there's a lot of pressures from the pellet industry and other industries and wanting access to better lands for forests.
Right.
So
well, I think, right, and I think that, you know, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the most important thing is to get in at the point when the Forest Service is doing their management plan.
Right. That's
and
what I'm going to talk about later.
Right, so the management plans come up, you know, what, at 10-year rotation?
No, it's generally 15 to 20.
15 to 20.
Sometimes 25.
So it's like this
Depends on money.
Yeah, so this is like a critical junction where we have to have our clear voice. And I'm sorry if I don't know completely, but the Ginseng Growers Association, Robert, this is really you kind of holding this group together. And how long has this group been meeting, or?
Yeah, thank you for helping us understand some things. Because it is a complicated issue.
Yeah.
I was part of the North Carolina Natural Products Association from 2002 till 2012, and we put on a Ginseng Expo in 2012, and it was deemed at that point that we had enough juice to break away and start this association.
Okay.
So,
all right, so it's fairly new.
Yes, since 2012.
Right. Okay, which I remember that whole, I thought that was the history, I just wasn't sure, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's important. This just wanted to read this little piece. I've been doing a fellowship at the Lloyd Library, and you know, looking back, it was Peck who in 1914 started the Ginseng and Golden Seal Bulletin, and that continued. This is actually from a special crops bulletin that then later, I'm not sure exactly when the Ginseng Golden Seal Bulletin stopped in production, but it was monthly, and it was growers writing in about their experience in growing these plants. It was also a place where everybody was placing their pricings. So it was this really interesting, publication. Like I said, it came out monthly for like a 20 to 30 year span. And then another really interesting publication started coming out of New York. And this is 1930. And it says, present markets prove that growers of special crops needs an organization. Many growers insisting for cooperation, but no apparent leader is available. And, this is written by the editor of the specialty crop on ginseng bulletin that came out of New York. And he says, not a month passes but that I receive several letters from various producers of golden seal and ginseng asking that something be done to curb the ever-increasing decline in the ginseng golden seal market. Many growers who have spent considerable money and time in the production of a crop of high-grade marketable roots come to the selling season only to find that they are at the mercy of the middleman and the retailers who have established a price which barely pays for expense of harvesting the crop. And so it's a very, it goes on, but it's interesting to reflect back on this history. And what is apparent to me in reviewing all this stuff is, especially 1920s, 30s, 40s, so many people were growing these crops in their forests. And in a pretty intensive, intentional way.
And those old USDA bulletins, so much of the information is still perfectly valid.
Perfect.
It's great stuff.
Yeah. So I'm hoping I've been discussing with the Lloyd Library. It looks like it's going to be successful. It doesn't seem like it's too big of an ask to have these bulletins. We're working on digitizing them so they can be online. But it's just like a time warp. There's some of these issues that we all are facing with fungal diseases, with the markets. And interestingly enough, it feels like, from what I gather, that in many cases, the golden seal was much more of a stable crop to grow because there was this consistent domestic market. And it's almost like, I don't know, it just takes such a short amount of time to lose this, because it feels like, this dip in the use of herbal products kind of vanishes, in the 50s, 60s, and then boom, all these growers kind of disappear, and it's back to primarily wild harvesting, and except for, the shade cloth operations in Wisconsin and whatnot. But then now we're seeing, 15, 16 years in a row, an incredible growth in the herbal market. So these demands for these plants are increasing, but yet we haven't adapted to get back into this forest cultivation, and then we've lost some of these skills and knowledge in the process. So we're bringing it back.
Yeah. Okay, that is exciting. I want to thank you personally.